Jasmine Reynolds stands frozen in the bank lobby, her designer's suit and CFO badge seemingly invisible to the sneering manager. "We need additional verification." 20 minutes later, she walks back through those same doors, this time as the new owner of Mid-State Financial. Revenge will be swift. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination firsthand, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice. Now, let's discover how one powerful woman turned the tables on those who underestimated her. The crisp October morning carried a hint of possibility as Jasmine Reynolds straightened her tailored navy Armani suit and checked her reflection in the gleaming glass doors of Mid-State Financial's Franklin branch. At 39, Jasmine had already accomplished what most executives only dreamed of achieving in a lifetime. Her Harvard MBA hung proudly in her downtown Chicago office at Horizon Investments, where she'd recently been appointed CEO after 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder with remarkable precision and determination. Today should have been a routine visit. As the newly appointed CEO of Horizon Investments, which had just acquired Mid-State Financial in a quiet but significant deal, Jasmine had decided to visit several branches unannounced. Her philosophy was simple: see how things operated naturally, without the polished veneer that inevitably appeared when executives announced their arrival. You learn more in 10 minutes of watching people who don't know they're being evaluated than in 10 hours of scheduled meetings, she often told her executive team. Growing up in working-class Detroit, Jasmine had learned early that the world didn't offer second chances to people who looked like her. The daughter of a factory worker father and nurse mother, she'd fought for every opportunity, securing a full scholarship to Princeton for her undergraduate degree before Harvard Business School recognized her exceptional talent. The security guard barely glanced up as she entered the Franklin branch, the flagship location of Mid-State in the affluent North Shore suburbs of Chicago. The marble floors gleamed under soft lighting, and private banking cubicles lined the perimeter, promising discretion and personalized service for the branch's wealthy clientele. Jasmine approached the teller counter, where a young white woman with a nameplate reading Brittany Clark was organizing paperwork. "Good morning," Jasmine said with a warm smile. "I'd like to speak with the branch manager, please." Brittany looked up, her practiced customer service smile faltering slightly as she took in Jasmine's appearance. Her eyes darted to the security guard before responding. "Do you have an appointment?" Brittany asked, her voice carrying a note of skepticism that Jasmine had heard countless times before. "No, but it's regarding the recent acquisition," Jasmine replied calmly. "I'm sure he'll want to speak with me." Brittany's eyes narrowed slightly. "And your name is?" "Jasmine Reynolds." The name clearly meant nothing to Brittany, who nodded curtly. "I'll see if Mr. Sloan is available. Please take a seat." Jasmine remained standing, observing the branch operations. She noticed how Brittany immediately ushered a white customer who had just entered directly to a desk, bypassing the waiting area altogether. After 15 minutes, during which 3 white customers were immediately assisted, Brittany finally returned. "Mr. Sloan can see you now. Follow me, please." Walter Sloan's office was exactly what Jasmine expected. Expensive furniture, golf memorabilia, and family photos displaying a smiling white family on a yacht. Walter himself was in his mid-50s, with thinning gray hair and the ruddy complexion of someone who spent weekends on golf courses. He didn't stand when Jasmine entered, nor did he offer his hand. "How can I help you today?" he asked, not bothering to introduce himself. "I'm Jasmine Reynolds, CEO of Horizon Investments. I'm here to review some details of our acquisition of Mid-State Financial." Walter's expression shifted from indifference to disbelief, then to something resembling amusement. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Did Derek from Regional put you up to this?" Jasmine maintained her composure, though her pulse quickened. "No joke, Mr. Sloan. Horizon completed the acquisition of Mid-State last week. I'm visiting branches to get a first-hand understanding of operations." Walter's smile disappeared. "I'm going to need to see some identification." Jasmine produced both her Horizon CEO badge and her driver's license. Walter examined them with exaggerated scrutiny. These look official enough, but I wasn't informed of any visit today. Protocol dictates that branch visits from corporate are scheduled through proper channels. He slid her identification back across the desk. If you'd like to make an appointment, you can do so through our regional office. That defeats the purpose of an unannounced visit, doesn't it? Jasmine countered. Walter's jaw tightened. Ms. Reynolds, if that's who you actually are, we have procedures. I can't just have anyone walking in claiming to be an executive. I've provided my identification, Jasmine said evenly. I'd like to proceed with reviewing your quarterly performance reports and meeting with your loan officers. That won't be possible today, Walter replied firmly. We need additional verification before sharing sensitive information. Perhaps you could have your assistant contact our regional director to arrange a proper visit. Jasmine noted the security guard, Charles Baker according to his nameplate, had positioned himself near the office door, arms crossed. Mr. Sloan, I understand protocol, but as the CEO of your parent company, I have full authority to review any branch at any time. Walter's expression hardened. Look, I don't know who you really are or what you're trying to pull, but this branch serves high net worth clients who trust us with their privacy. I can't have someone wandering around claiming to be an executive without proper clearance. I've provided proper identification, Jasmine reiterated, her voice remaining steady despite her rising anger. Anyone can get a fancy ID card made, Walter scoffed. For all I know, you could be trying to gather information for identity theft. The implication was clear, and it stung like a physical blow. Jasmine had encountered this kind of treatment before, but it never hurt less. At that moment, an older white man in a golf shirt entered the branch and waved at Walter through the glass wall of his office. Walter immediately brightened, stood, and excused himself to greet the man with a hearty handshake and back slap. Jasmine watched as Walter personally escorted the man to a private banking cubicle without asking for any identification whatsoever. When Walter returned, his demeanor remained cold. Ms. Reynolds, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you'd like to verify your identity and position, you can contact our corporate office. They'll arrange a proper visit if your claims check out. You're refusing to provide me service? Jasmine asked, wanting to be absolutely clear. I'm following security protocols, Walter replied. We can't be too careful these days. Perhaps another branch might be more suitable for whatever you need. The implication that she should go to a branch in a less affluent, predominantly black neighborhood was thinly veiled at best. Jasmine stood, straightened her suit jacket, and met Walter's gaze directly. Thank you for your time, Mr. Sloan. This has been quite informative. As she walked out, she felt the eyes of every employee on her. Brittany avoided eye contact entirely, busying herself with paperwork. The security guard followed a few steps behind her until she exited the building. Not once did Jasmine reveal that she was, in fact, now effectively his boss. That revelation would come soon enough. The sleek glass tower housing Horizon Investments headquarters in downtown Chicago reflected the afternoon sun as Jasmine's car pulled into her reserved parking space. Unlike the ornate, traditional architecture of Mid-State's Franklin branch, Horizon's offices embraced modern minimalism, a physical manifestation of Jasmine's forward-thinking approach to business. As she rode the elevator to the executive floor, Jasmine allowed herself to feel the full weight of the morning's humiliation. Her hands trembled slightly as she replayed Walter Sloan's dismissive tone, his thinly veiled accusations, the way the security guard had shadowed her as if she were a potential thief rather than the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. Not again, she whispered to herself as the elevator doors opened. The memory of her first banking experience at 17 flooded back with painful clarity. She had gone to deposit her first paycheck from a summer job at a prestigious law firm, wearing her best clothes and feeling proud of her accomplishment. The teller had scrutinized her ID for what felt like eternity, called a manager, and ultimately placed an extended hold on her funds as a precaution. Meanwhile, her white friend who had worked the same job had her funds available immediately at a different branch of the same bank. Kevin Martinez, Jasmine's executive assistant, immediately sensed something was wrong when she entered the office. Meeting didn't go well? he asked, falling into step beside her as she strode toward her corner office. You could say that, Jasmine replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. The branch manager refused to believe I was CEO, practically accused me of identity theft, and had security escort me out. Kevin, a sharp-dressed 32-year-old with Mexican heritage who had experienced his own share of discrimination, shook his head in disgust. Tell me you're filing a complaint. That's textbook discrimination. Jasmine set her bag down on her desk and gazed out at the Chicago skyline. A complaint would be buried or dismissed with some half-hearted apology. I'm thinking bigger. Kevin raised an eyebrow. I know that look. What are you planning? First, get me Lawrence Thompson on the phone. Then pull every file we have on the Franklin branch of Mid-State. Performance metrics, customer demographics, employee records, everything. As Kevin left to make the calls, Jasmine closed her eyes and recalled the words of her mentor, Eleanor Williams. Eleanor had been one of the first black women to break into investment banking in Chicago in the 1980s, facing discrimination that made Jasmine's experiences seem mild by comparison. When they show you who they are, believe them, Eleanor had told her. But don't react emotionally. Respond strategically. Your anger is justified, but your strategy is what will create lasting change. Lawrence Thompson, Horizon's chief legal counsel, appeared on her video screen within minutes. In his early 60s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, Lawrence had been with the company for over 20 years and had guided Jasmine through the complex acquisition of Mid-State. Jasmine, what's happened? He asked, immediately noting her expression. She recounted the morning's events in precise detail, her legal training allowing her to recall specific statements and actions. Lawrence's expression darkened as she spoke. This is unacceptable. We could have legal grounds for a discrimination suit, but given that we now own the company, it complicates things. I don't want to sue Lawrence. I want to fix the problem at its root, Jasmine replied. How much authority do I have to make personnel changes at the branch level under the acquisition agreement? Complete authority, Lawrence confirmed. The transition period gives the former leadership advisory roles only. Operational control transferred to Horizon effective last Friday. Jasmine nodded. Good. Now what about previous complaints against this branch or Walter Sloan specifically? I'll have to check, but I can tell you that during our due diligence, we flagged several Mid-State branches for potential compliance issues regarding fair lending practices. I don't recall if Franklin was one of them. Find out, Jasmine instructed, and arrange an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I want to discuss implementing a company-wide anti-discrimination initiative immediately, starting with the Franklin branch. After Lawrence signed off, Kevin returned with a thick folder. Preliminary files on Franklin branch. More coming in as departments respond to the request. Jasmine spent the next 3 hours poring over the documents, her suspicions growing with each page. The Franklin branch, located in one of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs, had a customer base that was 94% white, despite serving an area that census data showed was nearly 20% non-white. Loan approval rates showed statistically significant disparities when controlling for income and credit scores. Most damning of all, buried in the HR files was evidence of 3 separate discrimination complaints against Walter Sloan in the past 5 years, all settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. By the time she convened the emergency board meeting the next morning, Jasmine had developed a comprehensive plan. The 12 members of Horizon's board, 8 men and 4 women, 3 of whom were people of color, listened intently as she outlined both her personal experience and the evidence of systemic issues. This isn't about one bad manager or one isolated incident, Jasmine concluded. This is about a culture that permeates the entire organization. If we're going to successfully integrate Mid-State into Horizon, we need to address this head-on. Richard Blackwell, one of the older board members, cleared his throat. While I agree this treatment was unacceptable, I'm concerned about disrupting operations too dramatically. Perhaps we could quietly transfer this manager rather than creating, well, drama. Jasmine fixed him with a steady gaze. Richard, would you consider racial discrimination Drama? Richard shifted uncomfortably. That's not what I meant. Discrimination isn't a PR problem to be managed, Jasmine interrupted. It's a moral and business failure that costs us talented employees, valuable customers, and ultimately, profits. I'm not proposing drama. I'm proposing accountability. By the end of the meeting, the board had approved her plan with only Richard abstaining. Jasmine would personally lead a comprehensive overhaul of the Franklin branch, establishing new anti-discrimination policies and training that would then be implemented company-wide. As the board members filed out, Jasmine remained seated, reviewing her notes. Eleanor's voice echoed in her mind. They'll underestimate you because of how you look. Use that. Let them think you're just angry when you're actually being strategic. She smiled to herself. Walter Sloan had no idea what was coming. Have you ever wondered what happens behind closed doors when banks evaluate your applications? What factors truly determine who gets approved and who gets denied? If you've experienced that sinking feeling of rejection without clear explanation, comment. Number 1 right now. Hit like if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of their appearance, and subscribe to see more stories of justice being served. Now, let's uncover what Jasmine discovered when she dug deeper into the Franklin branch. The investigation into the Franklin branch began with surgical precision. Jasmine assembled a small, elite team sworn to complete confidentiality. The stakes were too high for leaks or premature accusations. We need irrefutable evidence, Jasmine told her team during their first strategy session. Not just of individual bias, but of systemic discrimination. We need to prove this is cultural, not coincidental. Teresa Chen, a renowned diversity consultant with a background in both banking and civil rights law, led the external investigation. At 45, Teresa had built her reputation by helping organizations identify and address discriminatory practices with data-driven approaches rather than just sensitivity training. We'll start with secret shopper tests, Teresa explained, pulling up a presentation on her tablet. We'll send people of different races but identical financial profiles to the branch. Same income, same credit score, same assets. Everything controlled except race. Over the next 2 weeks, 12 customers visited the Franklin branch. Each carried hidden recording devices and followed identical scripts requesting information about home loans, investment accounts, and premium banking services. The results were damning. Black and Latino testers waited an average of 27 minutes before being helped, while white testers were assisted within 4 minutes. White testers were offered coffee, non-white testers weren't. White testers were told about special promotions and lower interest rates that were never mentioned to non-white testers. Most significantly, when discussing qualification requirements for premium accounts, the bar was consistently set higher for non-white testers. They told our white tester that premium services started at $50,000 in deposits, Teresa reported, displaying side-by-side transcripts, but told our black tester with the identical profile that the minimum was $250,000. Jasmine nodded grimly. What about loan pre-approvals? Even worse, Teresa confirmed. White testers were pre-approved for amounts averaging 30% higher than non-white testers with identical profiles. As Teresa's team gathered external evidence, Jasmine authorized a forensic audit of the branch's internal communications and records. What they found in Walter Sloan's emails made her blood boil. Check out this email chain between Walter and Gregory Hayes, their senior loan officer, Kevin said, handing Jasmine a folder marked confidential. They refer to certain neighborhoods as high-risk territories and applicants from those areas as unlikely to maintain payments. Every single one of those neighborhoods is predominantly Black or Latino. Jasmine read the emails carefully, noting how Walter had instructed his team to apply enhanced scrutiny to applicants from these areas, effectively creating a modern version of redlining without explicitly mentioning race. In another email, Walter complained about a diversity hire that regional management had forced on him. Kenneth Wilson, one of the few Black employees at the branch. Walter had written to another manager, having to watch every word I say around him. Can't even make a joke anymore without HR getting involved. The investigation expanded to include interviews with former employees. 5 had left the Franklin branch in the past year alone, citing the toxic culture as their primary reason for departure. Walter made it clear that certain customers were more valuable than others, explained former teller Jessica Patel. If you spent too much time with the wrong customers, he'd call you into his office for a talk about efficiency. By the 3rd week of the investigation, Jasmine had accumulated enough evidence to justify terminating Walter's employment 10 times over. But she wasn't satisfied with removing just one problematic manager. She wanted to understand how deep the rot went. That led to an uncomfortable meeting with Darren Phillips, Mid-State's outgoing CEO, who was serving in an advisory capacity during the transition. Darren greeted Jasmine warmly in his spacious office at Mid-State's headquarters, but his smile faded as she laid out the preliminary findings of her investigation. "These are serious allegations," he said carefully, adjusting his tie. "But I think you might be overreacting to what was likely a misunderstanding at the branch." "A misunderstanding?" Jasmine repeated, her tone icy. "Mr. Phillips, I have documented evidence of systemic discrimination at one of your flagship branches. Walter Sloan has been the subject of 3 previous discrimination complaints that were settled quietly. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern." Darren sighed. "Banking is a relationship business, Jasmine. Different communities have different needs and risk profiles. What looks like discrimination to outsiders is often just prudent risk management." "Is that what you call it when identical loan applications are treated differently based solely on the applicant's race?" Jasmine pushed a folder across the desk. "Or when black customers are kept waiting 6 times longer than white customers? Is that prudent risk management?" Darren didn't open the folder. "Look, every organization has a few bad apples. If Walter crossed a line, discipline him. But don't turn this into some crusade that disrupts our entire operation and alienates our core customers." "Your core customers," Jasmine noted, "appear to be exclusively white, despite serving a diverse metropolitan area. That's not a coincidence, Mr. Phillips. That's by design." "We serve whoever walks through our doors," Darren protested. "After my experience, I'm not sure that's true," Jasmine replied. "And as the new CEO of your parent company, I find that unacceptable." The meeting ended with tension thick enough to cut with a knife. As Jasmine left, she knew she'd not only identified the problem at the Franklin branch, but also why it had been allowed to persist. The rot started at the top. Would you ignore discrimination if you witnessed it? Or would you speak up like Jasmine? Comment number 1 if you'd confront bias head-on. Like this video if you believe companies should be held accountable for discriminatory practices, and subscribe to see how this story ends. What do you think Jasmine will do with all this evidence she's gathered? Let's find out. As Jasmine expanded her investigation, she discovered she wasn't fighting alone. Victoria Armstrong, a white senior vice president at Mid-State who oversaw retail banking operations, requested a private meeting 3 weeks into the investigation. They met at a small cafe several blocks from any Mid-State or Horizon office to ensure privacy. Victoria, a polished executive in her early 50s with shoulder-length blonde hair and sharp blue eyes, appeared nervous as she stirred her untouched coffee. "I've been with Mid-State for 17 years, Victoria began, her voice low. "I've tried to change things from within, but—" She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "What happened to you at the Franklin branch wasn't an isolated incident." "I know," Jasmine replied. "We found evidence of systematic discrimination." Victoria nodded grimly. "I've documented dozens of cases over the years. I've filed reports with HR, raised concerns in executive meetings, even tried going directly to Darren. Nothing changes. The reports disappear, I'm told it's being handled, and then everything continues exactly as before." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thumb drive. "This contains every report I've filed, along with notes from meetings where my concerns were dismissed. I've kept meticulous records, thinking someday someone would care enough to do something." Jasmine accepted the drive. "Why are you sharing this now?" Because for the first time, I believe something might actually change, Victoria replied. When I heard you were investigating Walter Sloan, I thought finally someone is taking this seriously. Victoria became an invaluable ally, providing insider knowledge of Mid-State's operations and helping identify other branches with similar issues. More importantly, she connected Jasmine with Kenneth Wilson, a black junior loan officer at the Franklin branch who had been documenting his own experiences. Kenneth met with Jasmine after hours at Horizon's offices, constantly checking over his shoulder as if expecting to be followed. "Mr. Sloan doesn't know I'm here," he explained, his voice tense. "If he found out I was talking to you—" "Your job is protected, Kenneth," Jasmine assured him. "Whistleblower protections apply, and besides, I'm ultimately in charge now." Gradually, Kenneth relaxed enough to share his experiences. "It's never anything obvious enough to report. It's the small things, the customers he steers me away from, the loans that get additional review when I approve them, the way he introduces me as our diversity hire to certain clients with a little wink." Kenneth had kept a journal documenting specific incidents, including dates, times, and witnesses. "I never thought anything would come of it. Just wanted a record in case things got worse." With allies inside Mid-State providing crucial information, Jasmine's investigation gained momentum, but not everyone supported her efforts. Richard Blackwell, the Horizon board member who had expressed concerns about drama, continued to push back against Jasmine's approach. He requested a private lunch at his club, an exclusive establishment in downtown Chicago that had only recently begun admitting women and minorities as members. "Jasmine, I've been in banking for 40 years, Richard began after they ordered. "I understand your concern about this incident, but I'm worried you're letting personal feelings cloud your business judgment." "My business judgment is precisely why I'm addressing this issue head-on," Jasmine replied evenly. "Discrimination is bad business, Richard." Of course, he said dismissively. "Nobody supports discrimination. But there are ways to handle these situations quietly. Transfer this Walter fellow to another position. Bring in some diversity training. Issue a new policy memo. But this full-scale investigation is causing anxiety throughout the organization." "Good," Jasmine said firmly. "Some people should be anxious." Richard's expression hardened. "Several major clients have gotten wind of this. They're concerned about disruption to their banking relationships." "Are they concerned about disruption, or concerned that their preferential treatment might end?" Jasmine asked pointedly. "That's exactly the kind of inflammatory rhetoric that concerns me," Richard replied. "You're turning this into an us versus them situation. That's not how you successfully integrate an acquisition." "I disagree," Jasmine said. "Addressing discriminatory practices directly is exactly how we create a unified culture based on merit and equal treatment. Anything less would compromise my values and Horizon's stated mission." Richard sighed dramatically. "The board supported your initial investigation, but a wholesale purge of management could trigger a vote of no confidence." The threat was thinly veiled, but Jasmine didn't flinch. "Then call the vote, Richard. I stand by my decisions." As Richard's opposition intensified, Jasmine expanded her coalition beyond the corporate walls. She met with Pastor Isaiah Johnson, whose congregation included many community members who had experienced discrimination at various Mid-State branches. Pastor Johnson, a dignified man in his 60s, welcomed her to his church office on Chicago's South Side. "Banking discrimination has been strangling our community for generations," he explained, showing Jasmine a map where he'd marked areas where small businesses had failed after being denied loans. "It's not just about individual inconvenience. It's about systematic economic suppression." Pastor Johnson arranged a community meeting where dozens of people shared their experiences with Mid-State. Pattern after pattern emerged. Higher interest rates, lower credit limits, excessive documentation requirements, longer wait times, and subtle discouragements. "They never say no outright," explained one community member who owned a small construction company. "They just make the process so difficult and humiliating that you eventually give up." Through Pastor Johnson, Jasmine connected with Sofia Rodriguez, an investigative journalist who had been researching banking discrimination throughout Chicago for a major expose. "I've been trying to get solid evidence for 2 years," Sophia explained when they met at her cramped office at the Chicago Tribune. "Banks are careful to maintain plausible deniability. Your internal investigation could provide the smoking gun I've been looking for." Jasmine was cautious. "I'm not looking to create a media scandal. I want to fix the problem." "Sometimes public accountability is the only way to ensure lasting change," Sophia countered. "I'm not asking for confidential customer information, just confirmation of the patterns I've already documented." As Jasmine built her coalition, the opposition grew more determined. Anonymous threatening emails began appearing in her inbox. "Back off, or your career will be the one ending." "Some people don't want things to change. Powerful people. You're making enemies in places you can't afford to." Jasmine forwarded each message to Lawrence Thompson and increased security at her home and office, but she refused to be intimidated. If anything, the threats confirmed she was on the right track. "They wouldn't be trying to scare me if they weren't afraid themselves," she told Kevin after receiving a particularly graphic threat. "And the only thing they have to fear is accountability." With her allies in place and her evidence compiled, Jasmine prepared for the confrontation that would change mid-state forever. Walter Sloan's day of reckoning was approaching, and he had no idea what was coming. Exactly 1 month after being denied service, Jasmine Reynolds returned to the Franklin branch of Midstate Financial. This time, she wasn't alone. Lawrence Thompson walked on her right, carrying a leather briefcase containing the damning evidence they'd gathered. Victoria Armstrong walked on her left, her presence sending a clear message to the branch staff that this visit had senior leadership support. Jasmine had chosen her wardrobe deliberately, the same navy Armani suit she'd worn during her first visit. She wanted Walter to remember exactly who she was and how he had treated her. The branch was busy with the Friday afternoon rush. Customers stood in line for the tellers, while loan officers met with clients in the glass-walled cubicles along the perimeter. No one paid particular attention to the 3 executives who entered. No one except Brittany Clark, whose eyes widened in recognition before she quickly looked away. Jasmine approached the reception desk, where a young man she didn't recognize greeted her with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Midstate Financial. How can I help you today?" "I'm here to see Walter Sloan," Jasmine replied. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to see me," Jasmine said, her voice carrying enough authority that the receptionist immediately reached for the phone. "Who should I say is here?" "Jasmine Reynolds, CEO of Horizon Investments." The receptionist's eyebrows shot up, but to his credit, he maintained his composure as he made the call. After a brief conversation, he directed them to wait in a small meeting area. Unlike her first visit, they waited less than 2 minutes before Walter emerged from his office, a practiced smile fixed on his face. He didn't immediately recognize Jasmine, approaching with his hand extended. "Ms. Reynolds, what a pleasure to have you visit our branch. I'm Walter Sloan, branch manager. If I'd known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper welcome for the CEO of our parent company." His tone was unctuous, clearly having been informed of her position since their last encounter. Jasmine didn't take his hand. "We've met before, Mr. Sloan, 1 month ago, in this very branch. You refused me service and had security escort me out." Walter's smile faltered as recognition dawned. His eyes darted between Jasmine, Lawrence, and Victoria, clearly calculating his response. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said finally, his smile now strained. "We have strict protocols for verifying identity, especially for high-level account access. If there was any confusion, I sincerely apologize." "I don't believe there was any confusion," Jasmine replied evenly. "But we'll discuss that in detail. Is the conference room available?" Walter nodded stiffly, leading them toward a glass-walled room at the back of the branch. Employees watched curiously as the group passed, sensing the tension. Charles Baker, the security guard who had shadowed Jasmine during her previous visit, stood straighter as they walked by, his expression uncertain. Once seated in the conference room, Jasmine placed her phone on the table and activated the recording app. "I'm recording this conversation for accuracy. Do you have any objections, Mr. Sloan?" Walter shifted uncomfortably. "Is that really necessary?" "I believe it is," Jasmine replied. "Lawrence, please provide Mr. Sloan with the notice of investigation." Lawrence slid a document across the table. Walter glanced at it, his face paling. What is this? An investigation? Into what? Into discriminatory banking practices at this branch, Jasmine stated. Specifically, evidence that you and your staff systematically discriminate against customers of color. Walter's expression hardened. That's ridiculous. We follow all fair banking regulations to the letter. Do you? Jasmine asked. Because our investigation suggests otherwise. Let's start with my personal experience. Why did you refuse me service when I came in last month? As I said, we have strict protocols. Protocols that apparently don't apply to white customers, Jasmine interrupted. While I was here, I observed 3 white customers receive immediate service without showing any identification. That's different, Walter protested. Those were established customers I recognized. Yet you had no problem believing I was committing identity theft rather than being who I said I was, Jasmine noted. Why is that, Mr. Sloan? Walter's face flushed. You're twisting what happened. This is completely unfair. Through the glass walls, Jasmine could see branch employees watching the conversation intently. Charles Baker had positioned himself near the conference room, his posture suggesting he was uncertain whether to intervene. Let's move beyond my experience, Jasmine continued. Victoria, please share what you've observed regarding the Franklin branch. Victoria opened her tablet and pulled up a series of reports. The Franklin branch has the highest disparity in service times between white and non-white customers in the entire mid-state network. It also has the lowest approval rate for minority loan applicants, even when controlling for all relevant financial factors. Walter scoffed. Statistics can be manipulated to show anything. Our decisions are based on sound financial criteria, not race. Lawrence removed another document from his briefcase. Then how do you explain these emails, Mr. Sloan? Where you specifically instruct your loan officers to apply enhanced scrutiny to applicants from predominantly minority neighborhoods. Walter's eyes widened as he saw his own words in print. You had no right to access my private communications. As CEO of your parent company, I have every right, Jasmine corrected him. Just as I had every right to conduct secret shopper tests that revealed your staff consistently offers better rates and terms to white customers than to black or Latino customers with identical financial profiles. Walter's face had turned from red to white. He reached for his phone. I need to call my attorney. That's your right, Jasmine acknowledged. But before you do, you should know that I've already spoken with 3 former employees who have confirmed your discriminatory practices, and I have access to the settlements from the 3 previous discrimination complaints against you that Midstate buried. Walter froze, his finger hovering over his phone. Those were confidential settlements, which are now the property of Horizon Investments as part of our acquisition, Lawrence explained. The non-disclosure agreements prevent the complainants from discussing the settlements, but they don't prevent us from reviewing them as the new owners. Walter's composure cracked. This is a witch hunt. You're targeting me because of what happened between us. This is personal. No, Mr. Sloan, Jasmine replied calmly. This is professional. Your actions and policies violate federal banking regulations, Midstate's own stated policies, and Horizon's core values. The fact that I experienced your discrimination firsthand simply brought it to my attention sooner rather than later. Through the glass walls, Jasmine could see that a small crowd of employees had gathered, watching the confrontation with rapt attention. Charles Baker had entered the room and stood by the door, his expression troubled. Walter noticed the audience and lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I've been in banking for 30 years. I have connections throughout the industry. One word from me, and your acquisition will face regulatory hurdles you can't imagine. The threat hung in the air for a moment before Jasmine smiled. Are you threatening me, Mr. Sloan? I'm stating facts, Walter hissed. I play golf with 2 Federal Reserve Board members and the Illinois Banking Commissioner. Do you really want to make enemies of people who can shut down your entire operation with one phone call? Victoria looked shocked at the naked threat, but Jasmine remained calm. Lawrence, please add threatening a federal investigation to the record. Walter realized his mistake too late. He tried to backpedal. That's not what I meant. I'm simply pointing out that this witch hunt could have unintended consequences for everyone involved. The only witch hunt here, Jasmine replied, is the one you've been conducting against minority customers for years, and it ends today. Walter's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and a look of panic crossed his face. The regional director is calling. He needs to be part of this conversation. By all means, Jasmine said, gesturing to the phone. Put him on speaker. Walter hesitated, then answered the call. Gerald, I have Jasmine Reynolds here with some absurd accusations. Walter, the voice interrupted, sounding strained. The board just informed me that Ms. Reynolds has their full support. Whatever she's there for, you need to cooperate fully. Walter's last hope of institutional support collapsed. But Gerald, she's claiming, we'll discuss it later. Gerald cut him off. For now, just cooperate. The call ended abruptly. Walter stared at his phone in disbelief, then looked up at Jasmine with a mixture of defeat and defiance. What do you want from me? The truth, Jasmine replied simply, followed by accountability. What would you do if someone who discriminated against you suddenly realized you held power over them? Would you seek revenge or justice? Comment number 1, if you believe in karma. And number 2, if you think systemic change is more important than personal vindication. Like this video if you've ever witnessed someone face consequences for their discriminatory actions, and subscribe to see more stories of empowerment. Now, let's see how Walter responds when his entire career hangs in the balance. The conference room had become the epicenter of a brewing storm. Through the glass walls, nearly every employee of the Franklin branch stood watching, their regular duties temporarily forgotten. Customer service representatives whispered to each other. Loan officers pretended to review paperwork while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. Even customers had noticed something significant was happening. Walter Sloan sat rigidly in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's cool temperature. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the desperate calculation of a man searching for an escape route. I think we should continue this conversation in private, he suggested, gesturing to the audience they'd attracted. I disagree, Jasmine replied calmly. In fact, I'd like to include more voices in this discussion. She turned to Victoria. Would you please ask the branch employees to join us, as many as can step away from customer service? Victoria nodded and left the room. Walter's eyes widened in alarm. You can't do that. This is a personnel matter that should be handled discreetly. This isn't just about you, Mr. Sloan, Jasmine corrected him. This is about a culture of discrimination that affects every employee and customer of this branch. Everyone deserves to be part of the conversation about changing that culture. Within minutes, Victoria returned with a group of nervous-looking employees. They filed into the conference room, some taking the remaining seats, others standing against the walls. Brittany Clark, the teller who had been working during Jasmine's first visit, hovered near the door as if ready to flee. Gregory Hayes, the senior loan officer implicated in Walter's discriminatory emails, positioned himself directly behind Walter in a show of support. Charles Baker, the security guard, entered last and closed the door behind him. Thank you all for joining us, Jasmine began. I'm Jasmine Reynolds, CEO of Horizon Investments, which recently acquired Midstate Financial. These are Lawrence Thompson, our chief legal counsel, and Victoria Armstrong, who many of you know from Midstate's executive team. She paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. I want to be transparent about why we're here. 1 month ago, I visited this branch unannounced and experienced discrimination firsthand. That led to an investigation which has revealed a pattern of discriminatory practices affecting customers of color at this branch. Murmurs rippled through the group. Gregory Hayes stepped forward. That's a serious accusation, he said, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone used to being respected without question. We make decisions based on financial metrics, not race. Is that so, Mr. Hayes? Lawrence asked, sliding a folder across the table. Would you care to explain these emails between you and Mr. Sloan discussing ways to discourage applicants from certain neighborhoods without explicitly violating fair lending laws? Hayes paled as he recognized the printed emails. Walter jumped in before he could respond. "This is being taken completely out of context," Walter insisted, his voice rising. "We were discussing legitimate risk factors that correlate with geography. Risk factors that mysteriously only apply to predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods?" Victoria challenged. "Our analysis shows that white applicants from those same neighborhoods receive different treatment." Walter's desperate gaze swept across the faces of his employees, seeking allies. "This is ridiculous. We've always followed company policies. Anyone here can confirm that." The room fell silent. Employees avoided eye contact, looking at the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but at Walter or Jasmine. Finally, Brittany Clark spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's not entirely true." All eyes turned to her. Walter's face darkened. "Brittany, think carefully before you speak." The warning in his tone was unmistakable, but Jasmine intervened. "Ms. Clark, you have my personal guarantee that there will be no retaliation for honesty. What did you want to say?" Brittany took a deep breath. "We have protocols for different types of customers." "What kind of protocols?" Jasmine prompted gently. "Mr. Sloan gave us a training about high-maintenance customers who need extra verification," Brittany explained, gaining confidence as she spoke. "But all the examples were people of color. We were told to flag certain zip codes for additional review and to call a manager before approving anything for those customers." Walter's face flushed with anger. "That's standard risk management. Every bank does it." "No, they don't," Victoria contradicted him. "Not legally, anyway." Gregory Hayes stepped forward aggressively. "This is a witch hunt. Ms. Reynolds had a bad experience and now she's on some crusade. Banking is complex. Customers who don't understand our processes often cry discrimination when they're simply not qualified." Jasmine turned her attention to him. "Mr. Hayes, our investigation included sending pairs of testers with identical financial profiles, same income, same credit score, same assets, to apply for loans. The only difference was their race. Would you care to guess the results?" Hayes shifted uncomfortably but maintained his defiant stance. "Isolated incidents don't prove systemic issues." 12 pairs isn't isolated," Lawrence corrected. "And when white applicants are approved for higher amounts with lower interest rates 100% of the time, that's a pattern." From the back of the room, a voice spoke up. "I can confirm that." Kenneth Wilson, the junior loan officer, stepped forward. Despite his evident nervousness, his voice was steady. "I've worked here for 18 months. I've seen loan applications from qualified Black applicants get additional review that white applicants with similar or worse profiles never receive. I've documented specific cases." Walter's expression turned venomous. "You've been spying on us. You're fired." "No, he's not," Jasmine stated firmly. "Whistleblower protections apply, Mr. Sloan, and you no longer have the authority to terminate anyone." The realization that he had lost control of the situation finally seemed to sink in for Walter. His shoulders sagged momentarily before he rallied with a new strategy. "Look," he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. "If there have been misunderstandings, or if some of our practices haven't kept pace with changing expectations, I take full responsibility as manager. We can implement whatever new training you think is necessary. I'm committed to doing better." The abrupt pivot to contrition was so transparent that several employees exchanged skeptical glances. "This isn't about training," Jasmine replied. "This is about intentional discrimination that you personally implemented and enforced. The evidence is overwhelming." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Walter argued, desperation creeping into his voice. "I've given 30 years to banking. My record speaks for itself." "Yes, it does," Jasmine agreed. "Including 3 previous discrimination complaints that were settled quietly. This isn't your second chance, Mr. Sloan. It's at least your 4th. Charles Baker, who had remained silent by the door, suddenly spoke up. "I have something to say." All eyes turned to the security guard. Walter glared at him. "Charles, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Charles replied, straightening his uniform. "I've worked security here for 5 years. Mr. Sloan instructed me to follow certain customers more closely than others. He said it was for loss prevention, but it was always Black and Latino customers, never white ones. I followed Ms. Reynolds when she first came in because those were my instructions. Follow people who don't look like they belong here. The room fell silent as the implications of his statement sank in. Walter's face contorted with rage. "You're all turning against me? After everything I've done for this branch? For your careers?" He pointed accusingly at various employees. "I approved your transfer. I overlooked your mistakes. I gave you that promotion when no one else would." His gaze landed on Brittany. "I hired you straight out of community college when you had zero experience. This is how you repay loyalty?" Before Brittany could respond, Jasmine interjected. "Mr. Sloan, that's enough. You're only digging yourself deeper." Walter turned on her, his composure completely abandoned. "This is all your fault. You couldn't handle being questioned, could you? Had to run back and use your position to get revenge, playing the race card when you're already a CEO. What more do you people want?" The slur hung in the air like a thunderclap. Several employees gasped. Lawrence began typing rapidly on his tablet, documenting the outburst. Jasmine remained perfectly calm. "Thank you for making my case so clearly, Mr. Sloan." She addressed the room at large. "What you've just witnessed is the unfiltered attitude that has shaped this branch's culture. This isn't about one bad day or a misunderstanding. This is about systemic bias that starts at the top and affects every aspect of how this branch operates." Walter realized his fatal error too late. He attempted to backpedal. "I didn't mean... that came out wrong. The stress of this situation is revealing, not excusing." Jasmine finished for him. She turned to address all the employees. "As of this moment, Walter Sloan is suspended pending formal termination proceedings. Effective immediately, this branch will begin implementing new anti-discrimination policies and practices that will be rolled out company-wide." Walter's face went from red to ashen. "You can't do this. I have a contract." "Which you violated repeatedly," Lawrence pointed out. "The termination will proceed according to company policy, but your access to bank systems and premises ends today." The reality of his situation finally seemed to hit Walter. He looked around the room, seeking any ally, but found none. Even Gregory Hayes had stepped away, distancing himself from his former mentor. "This isn't over," Walter said, his voice low and threatening. "I have friends in this industry. You'll regret this." "No, Mr. Sloan," Jasmine replied with quiet confidence. "The only regret here is that your discriminatory practices weren't stopped years ago." She nodded to Charles Baker. "Mr. Baker, please escort Mr. Sloan to his office to collect his personal belongings, then see him out of the building. His access cards and credentials should be surrendered immediately." As Walter was led away, the remaining employees looked to Jasmine with a mixture of shock, relief, and apprehension. "What happens to the rest of us?" Brittany asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "That," Jasmine replied, "depends on what happens next. Do you believe people can change once toxic leadership is removed, or does an entire system sometimes need to be rebuilt from the ground up? Comment below with your thoughts. Like this video if you believe in holding people accountable for discrimination, and subscribe to see what Jasmine does with the rest of the branch team. Will she fire everyone, or is there hope for redemption? Let's find out. The day after Walter Sloan's suspension, Jasmine called an all-hands meeting for the Franklin branch staff. The branch would remain closed until noon, with signs directing customers to nearby locations and an explanation about system upgrades. The conference room was packed. Some employees had clearly not slept well, their expressions anxious and uncertain. Others seemed almost relieved, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Kenneth Wilson sat near the front, his posture more confident than the previous day. Brittany Clark huddled with two other tellers, whispering nervously until Jasmine entered the room. "Good morning," Jasmine began. Taking her position at the head of the table, Victoria Armstrong and Lawrence Thompson flanked her, along with a woman the staff didn't recognize. "Yesterday was difficult for everyone," Jasmine acknowledged. "Today is about moving forward. First, let me introduce Teresa Chen, a diversity consultant who will be working with us throughout this transition. Teresa nodded to the group. I'm here as a resource, not as punishment. My goal is to help create a banking environment that serves all customers equally well. Jasmine continued, I want to be absolutely clear about two things. First, what happened at this branch wasn't just about Walter Sloan. He created and enforced discriminatory policies, but those policies were carried out by many people in this room. Several employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Second, this isn't just about avoiding discrimination. It's about actively creating an environment where every customer receives excellent service regardless of their race, ethnicity, or background. She placed a tablet on the table and pulled up a presentation. Effective immediately. We're implementing new anti-discrimination policies across all mid-state branches, starting here. These include standardized service protocols, transparent loan evaluation criteria, regular audits of approval rates across demographic groups, and comprehensive training for all customer-facing staff. As Jasmine outlined the changes, Gregory Hayes, who had been Walter's staunchest ally, stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous, he declared. Banking isn't a social justice project. It's about risk assessment and profitability. These new policies will force us to make bad loans and drive away our best customers. Several employees nodded in agreement. Jasmine had expected resistance and was prepared. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate your concern for profitability. Let me address that directly. She switched to a new slide showing performance metrics. These are the 10 highest performing branches in the mid-state network measured by profit margin. 8 of them have customer demographics that closely match their surrounding communities. The 2 that don't, including this one, show short-term gains but much higher customer turnover. She switched to another slide. This analysis from the Federal Reserve shows that banks with more diverse customer bases weather economic downturns better because their risk is more broadly distributed. In other words, diversity isn't just morally right, it's good business. Hayes remained unconvinced. That's all theoretical. In the real world, different communities have different risk profiles. Actually, that's not supported by the data, Teresa interjected. When controlling for actual financial factors rather than assumptions, default rates show no statistically significant difference across racial groups. The perception of higher risk is based on bias, not facts. Hayes scoffed. I've been in banking for 20 years. I know what I've seen. What you've seen, Jasmine replied calmly, is the result of decades of systemic discrimination that created the very disparities you're using to justify continued discrimination. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that stops today. Hayes looked around the room, seeking support, but found less than he expected. This is clearly a witch hunt. I won't be part of it. He gathered his things. I quit. That's your right, Jasmine acknowledged. Lawrence will provide exit paperwork on your way out. As Hayes stormed out, 2 other employees, both older white men who had worked closely with Walter, stood and followed him. Jasmine didn't try to stop them. Once they left, the atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. Several employees sat straighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Anyone else feel they can't work within a framework of equal treatment for all customers? Jasmine asked. No one moved. Good. Now let's talk about what happens next. Over the next hour, Jasmine and Teresa outlined the new policies in detail. Questions gradually shifted from defensive concerns about change to practical inquiries about implementation. By the time they broke for lunch, cautious optimism had replaced much of the earlier tension, but the reckoning extended beyond the branch. By mid-afternoon, word had leaked to the media. Sofia Rodriguez published the first article, Discrimination Exposed at Elite Chicago Bank Branch. Other outlets quickly picked up the story. Mid-state stock dropped 6% by closing bell as investors reacted to the potential scandal. Jasmine's phone buzzed constantly with calls from board members, journalists, and banking regulators. Richard Blackwell was among the first to call an emergency board meeting. "This is exactly the kind of disruption I warned against," he said, addressing the assembled board members in Horizon's conference room. "Our stock is down, customers are calling with concerns, and Walter Sloan is threatening a wrongful termination lawsuit, all because of a personal vendetta." Jasmine had anticipated this reaction and came prepared. "This isn't a vendetta, Richard. It's accountability." She distributed folders to each board member. "These contain just a sample of the evidence we've gathered, including statistical analyses of loan approvals, internal communications demonstrating discriminatory intent, and testimonials from affected customers." As the board members reviewed the materials, their expressions grew increasingly troubled. "The Franklin branch is just the beginning," Jasmine continued. "Our preliminary audit suggests similar patterns exist at 12 other branches. Left unaddressed, this represents not only a moral failure, but a significant legal and financial liability." She switched to a presentation showing the potential costs of class action lawsuits, regulatory fines, and reputation damage. Addressing this proactively isn't just the right thing to do. It's the financially responsible choice. One by one, board members who had been skeptical began nodding in agreement. Even Richard seemed to recognize the strength of her position. "What about the immediate stock impact?" asked another board member. "Short-term volatility in exchange for long-term sustainability," Jasmine replied confidently. "I've arranged interviews with key financial media to explain our proactive approach to addressing these issues. Investors respect decisive leadership that gets ahead of problems." By the end of the meeting, the board voted 8-4 to support Jasmine's approach, with Richard among the dissenters, but notably less vocal in his opposition. Outside the boardroom, public reaction was equally divided. Social media exploded with competing hashtags. Boycott mid-state versus #support Jasmine. Reynolds. Some customers publicly closed their accounts in protest. Others opened new ones in support. Walter Sloan didn't go quietly. Through his attorney, he issued a statement claiming he was the victim of reverse discrimination and a politically motivated witch hunt. He filed a wrongful termination lawsuit seeking millions in damages and gave interviews to sympathetic media outlets portraying himself as a scapegoat. "I applied the same standards to everyone," he claimed in one particularly inflammatory interview. "But in today's climate, any time a minority doesn't get exactly what they want, they cry discrimination. Now we have banks being run based on feelings rather than financial reality." The statement backfired spectacularly when recordings of his comments during the confrontation leaked online. Social media users created memes of his "What more do you people want?" outburst, making him the unwitting face of corporate discrimination. Through it all, Jasmine maintained her focus on the changes at hand. While the media storm raged, she worked closely with Teresa Chen to implement new training programs, revise policies, and create accountability systems that would prevent similar issues in the future. "The spotlight won't last forever," she told her team during a strategy session. "But the changes we're making will. That's what matters." A week after Walter's suspension, Jasmine returned to the Franklin branch for a follow-up meeting with the remaining staff. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. Employees who had been defensive or fearful now approached her with ideas and suggestions. Brittany Clark, who had been the first to confirm Walter's discriminatory policies, had emerged as an unexpected leader among the tellers. "We've started a working group to identify other problematic practices," she told Jasmine. "There's a lot more we can fix now that we're allowed to talk about these issues openly." Kenneth Wilson reported similar progress among the loan officers. "Without Hayes and his allies pushing their agenda, we're already seeing more consistent treatment of applications. People feel empowered to make decisions based on actual qualifications rather than unspoken biases." As Jasmine prepared to leave, Charles Baker, the security guard who had exposed Walter's profiling instructions, approached her. "Ms. Reynolds, I want to thank you," he said earnestly. "For years, I felt wrong about following those orders, but I needed this job. Now I can do my work with integrity." Jasmine smiled. "That's exactly what this is about, Mr. Baker. Creating an environment where everyone can work with integrity and customers can bank with dignity. The reckoning wasn't over. Walter's lawsuit was still pending, media attention continued, and the broader implementation across all branches was just beginning. But the transformation had undeniably begun. 3 months after Walter Sloan's suspension, the Franklin branch of Midstate Financial was almost unrecognizable, both physically and operationally. The imposing mahogany desk that had served as a barrier between customers and staff had been replaced with open consultation areas. The walls, once adorned with hunting prints and golf memorabilia, now featured artwork from local artists of diverse backgrounds. Most importantly, the atmosphere had shifted from intimidating exclusivity to welcoming professionalism. Teresa Chen had transitioned from external consultant to full-time Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Horizon Investments, overseeing changes across all mid-state branches. Her office at Franklin served as the pilot location for initiatives that would eventually roll out company-wide. "The physical changes are just the visible part," Teresa explained during a tour with Jasmine and a group of banking industry reporters. "The real transformation is in the policies and practices." She demonstrated the new loan application system, which standardized the evaluation process and removed opportunities for subjective bias. Applicants are now evaluated on the same criteria regardless of their zip code or appearance. The system flags any statistical disparities in approval rates for review. Kenneth Wilson, now promoted to assistant manager after Gregory Hayes' departure, led the branch's weekly training sessions on inclusive customer service. "We're focused on breaking the habits formed under the old leadership," he explained. Many employees didn't even realize how their behavior differed depending on who walked through the door. The transformation wasn't limited to internal operations. Under Jasmine's direction, the branch had launched new community outreach programs, including financial literacy workshops in underserved neighborhoods and special lending programs for minority-owned businesses. "Banking has historically been a gatekeeper that prevented wealth building in communities of color," Jasmine explained during a community meeting at Pastor Johnson's church. "We're trying to become a gateway instead." Pastor Johnson had become an important partner in these efforts. "For generations, financial institutions have extracted from our communities without investing back," he told his congregation. "What Jasmine and her team are doing represents a new model of banking, one that sees our community as valuable customers, not risks to be avoided." The transition wasn't without challenges. Some longtime customers transferred their accounts, uncomfortable with the changing culture. One wealthy client complained to Jasmine directly during a branch visit. "This place used to have standards," he said, gesturing disparagingly toward a group of young Latino entrepreneurs meeting with a loan officer. "Now it feels like any neighborhood bank." "Our standards are higher now, not lower," Jasmine replied pleasantly. "We expect excellence in service for every customer, not just some. If that doesn't align with your banking needs, I'd be happy to recommend alternatives." For every customer who left, however, 3 new ones opened accounts. The branch's customer base gradually began to reflect the actual demographics of the surrounding communities. Contrary to Walter's dire predictions, default rates remained stable while overall business increased. Victoria Armstrong, who had been promoted to head of retail banking operations for all of Mid-State, regularly cited Franklin as a case study in successful transformation. "We're seeing higher customer satisfaction, lower employee turnover, and improving profitability," she reported during a quarterly earnings call. "Inclusive banking isn't just ethically right, it's a competitive advantage." Not everyone embraced the changes. Walter Sloan continued his media campaign portraying himself as the victim of woke capitalism. His lawsuit proceeded through the courts, though several of his claims had already been dismissed. More concerning were the anonymous threats that continued to target Jasmine. Security at both her home and office had been increased after a particularly specific threat mentioned her daily running route. The FBI had been notified after investigators traced some of the threats to individuals connected to extremist groups opposed to racial equality. "You don't need to be the public face of this initiative," Lawrence advised during a security briefing. "We can have Victoria or Teresa handle the media appearances for a while." Jasmine considered the suggestion but ultimately declined. Stepping back would send exactly the wrong message. These threats are trying to silence me, to make an example of what happens when someone challenges the status quo. I won't give them that victory." Her resolve was tested when her car was vandalized outside a restaurant where she'd been meeting with community leaders. The windows were smashed, and a racial slur was spray-painted across the hood. Kevin found her in her office the next morning, reviewing security footage of the incident. "Maybe Lawrence is right," he suggested gently. "You've already won the important battles. Nobody would blame you for taking a step back from the public eye." Jasmine shook her head. "My grandmother marched for voting rights in Alabama and had dogs sicked on her. My mother integrated her nursing program and had patients refuse her care. If they didn't back down, neither will I." The vandalism incident backfired on Walter's public campaign. Photos of the damaged car went viral, creating a wave of public support for Jasmine and backlash against the discrimination she was fighting. Several major customers who had been on the fence publicly endorsed Mid-State's new direction. Even Richard Blackwell, who had been Jasmine's most vocal opponent on the board, began to change his position as the financial results came in. During a private meeting in Jasmine's office, he reluctantly admitted he had been wrong. "I was concerned about disruption," he acknowledged. "And there has been disruption, but not the kind I feared. The numbers speak for themselves." "Change is always disruptive," Jasmine replied. "The question is whether we disrupt harmful patterns or beneficial ones." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "I still think Walter got a raw deal, but I can't argue with the results you're achieving. The Franklin branch is outperforming projections." 5 months after the confrontation, Walter's lawsuit suffered a critical blow when Gregory Hayes, seeking to rehabilitate his own reputation, provided sworn testimony confirming Walter's discriminatory directives. "I was wrong to go along with it," Hayes admitted in his deposition. "We were taught to see certain customers as inherently higher risk based on factors that had nothing to do with their actual creditworthiness. Walter created a culture where questioning those assumptions was career suicide." The testimony was devastating to Walter's case. His attorney immediately began exploring settlement options, while Walter himself disappeared from public view. Meanwhile, the transformation at Franklin continued to gain momentum. Brittany Clark, once a reluctant enforcer of Walter's policies, had become an enthusiastic advocate for change. She led a customer service team that consistently received the highest satisfaction ratings in the network. "The biggest difference is that we're not afraid anymore," she explained to Jasmine during a performance review. "Under Walter, everyone was walking on eggshells, worried about making mistakes or questioning instructions. Now we feel empowered to do what's right." Charles Baker, the security guard who had exposed Walter's profiling instructions, implemented a new approach to branch security focused on behavior rather than appearance. "I watch what people do, not what they look like," he explained during a training session for other security personnel. "It's not only more fair, it's more effective." 6 months after the confrontation, Franklin hosted a community banking fair that would have been unimaginable under Walter's leadership. The branch parking lot was transformed into a festival space with food vendors, financial education booths, and activities for children. Current and potential customers from all backgrounds mingled with bank employees in a relaxed atmosphere designed to break down the intimidation many felt about banking. Pastor Johnson, who had helped organize the event, pulled Jasmine aside as they watched a loan officer patiently explaining mortgage options to a young couple. "You know, when you first came to my church talking about transforming banking, I was skeptical," he admitted. "I've heard promises from institutions before, but this," he gestured to the diverse crowd enjoying the event, "this is real change." Jasmine smiled. "It's just the beginning. The Franklin branch is our proof of concept. Now we're implementing these changes across all of Mid-State." The transformation was spreading beyond their own branches. Competitors had taken notice of Mid-State's success, with several announcing their own diversity initiatives. Banking industry publications featured case studies on the Franklin branch's turnaround, highlighting both the ethical and business benefits of inclusive banking. As the 6-month mark approached, Teresa prepared a comprehensive report documenting the changes and their impact. The numbers told a compelling story. Customer base up 22%, loan approvals across demographic groups showing no statistically significant disparities, employee satisfaction scores at record highs, and profitability exceeding projections by 18%. The Franklin model works, Teresa concluded in her presentation to the Horizon Board. We've proven that banking can be both inclusive and profitable. The question now is how quickly we can scale these changes across the entire organization. The board, including Richard Blackwell, voted unanimously to accelerate the implementation plan. What had begun as one woman's response to discrimination was evolving into a fundamental reimagining of how banking could work. For Jasmine, the transformation represented more than professional vindication. It was the fulfillment of the legacy her mentor Eleanor Williams had entrusted to her. Success isn't just about breaking barriers for yourself, Eleanor had told her years earlier. It's about ensuring those barriers stay down for everyone who comes after you. As Jasmine watched the Franklin branch thrive under its new direction, she knew that Eleanor would be proud. The barriers weren't just coming down, they were being replaced with bridges. 6 months to the day after Walter Sloan's suspension, Jasmine Reynolds stood on a small stage set up in the lobby of the Franklin branch of Midstate Financial. The space was packed with employees, customers, community members, and media representatives gathered for what had been billed as a community banking celebration. The branch looked nothing like it had half a year earlier. Gone were the intimidating marble counters and dark wood paneling that had created an atmosphere of exclusivity. In their place was an open, welcoming space with comfortable consultation areas, digital kiosks for self-service banking, and artwork from local artists of diverse backgrounds. But the physical changes paled in comparison to the transformation in the branch's culture and operations. 6 months ago, Jasmine began, addressing the assembled crowd. I walked into this branch and experienced discrimination firsthand. Today, I'm proud to stand in this same space and celebrate what it has become, a model for inclusive banking that serves all community members with equal respect and opportunity. She gestured to a large screen displaying the branch's performance metrics. The numbers tell an important story. Since implementing our new inclusive banking practices, the Franklin branch has achieved the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the entire Midstate network. Loan approvals are up 32% across all demographic groups, with no statistical disparities based on race or zip code. The crowd applauded as Jasmine continued. Most importantly, this branch has become a true community partner. Our small business lending program has helped launch 27 new local enterprises. Our financial literacy workshops have reached over 500 community members, and our internship program has introduced 15 young people from underserved neighborhoods to careers in finance. Kenneth Wilson, now the branch manager following his promotion, joined Jasmine on stage. Where once he had been nervous and hesitant, he now spoke with confidence and authority. Working at this branch used to mean compromising my values every day, he admitted. Now it means living them. We've proven that banking can be both profitable and equitable. It's not a trade-off, it's a better business model. The morning's biggest news came when Jasmine announced that Walter Sloan's lawsuit had been dismissed with prejudice the previous day. The judge had ruled that the evidence of discriminatory practices was so overwhelming that no reasonable jury could find in Walter's favor. This legal victory affirms what we've known all along, Jasmine explained. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's legally indefensible. The announcement was met with cheers and applause, particularly from branch employees who had lived under Walter's toxic leadership. Victoria Armstrong, now Executive Vice President of Retail Banking for the entire organization, presented Jasmine with the Banking Industry Association's Leadership and Equity Award, a recognition that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Jasmine didn't just talk about change, she made it happen, Victoria said during the presentation. When faced with discrimination, she could have filed a complaint, transferred the manager, or implemented superficial diversity training. Instead, she chose to transform an entire system from the ground up. Midstate stock, which had initially dropped following the controversy, had rebounded to reach new highs as investors recognized the business benefits of the company's new direction. Financial analysts who had initially criticized the approach now cited Horizon's leadership as a case study in ethical capitalism that delivers shareholder value. Richard Blackwell, once Jasmine's most vocal opponent on the board, took the stage next. His presence surprised many who knew of his initial resistance to Jasmine's approach. "I was wrong," he admitted bluntly. "I advised caution and discretion when confronting discrimination at the Franklin branch. I feared disruption would harm our business interests." He paused, looking directly at Jasmine. "I couldn't have been more mistaken." By addressing this issue head-on, Jasmine Reynolds didn't just create a more equitable banking environment, she created a more successful one. The crowd's approval was evident in their enthusiastic applause. Richard's public acknowledgement represented a significant shift in the banking industry's traditional thinking about diversity initiatives. Brittany Clark, who had been the first employee to speak up during the confrontation with Walter, now led the branch's customer service team. Her transformation was perhaps the most dramatic of all. Once fearful and complicit in discriminatory practices, she had become a passionate advocate for inclusive banking. "I used to think I was just following procedures," she told the audience when invited to speak. "I never questioned why certain customers were treated differently. Working under Walter, we learned not to ask questions. Now, questioning unfair practices is part of our job description." The celebration included the announcement of several new initiatives. The branch's successful community lending program would be expanded across all mid-state locations. A scholarship fund for minority students pursuing finance careers had been established in partnership with local universities. And the branch's internship program for high school students from underserved communities would become a pipeline for future talent. Pastor Johnson, who had become an important community partner, offered a blessing for the branch's continued success. "This transformation represents what's possible when institutions acknowledge past wrongs and commit to genuine change," he said. "This isn't just about banking, it's about building a more just society." As the formal program concluded, the celebration continued with food, music, and networking. Community members who had once felt unwelcome in the imposing bank building now moved comfortably through the space, connecting with financial advisors and learning about services. Jasmine found a quiet moment to speak with Kenneth Wilson, whose career had flourished since Walter's departure. "How does it feel to be the manager?" she asked. Kenneth smiled. "Honestly, it still feels surreal sometimes. Under Walter, I never imagined this would be possible. Now my biggest challenge is keeping up with all the new customer relationships we're building." "You've been instrumental in this transformation," Jasmine told him. "Your courage in speaking up made a difference." "I just followed your example," he replied. "You showed us all what leadership really means." As the celebration wound down, Jasmine noticed a young black college student watching her intently from across the room. Eventually, the student approached, introducing herself as Zora Thompson, a finance major at Northwestern University. "I read about what you did here," Zora said, her voice filled with admiration. "It inspired me to pursue banking instead of changing my major. I was starting to think there wasn't a place for people like me in finance." "There absolutely is," Jasmine assured her. "The industry needs your perspective and talent." "How did you know you could win?" Zora asked. "When you confronted Walter and the whole system, how did you know you wouldn't just lose everything?" Jasmine considered the question carefully. "I didn't know for certain," she admitted. "But my mentor, Eleanor Williams, taught me something I've never forgotten. She said, 'When you stand for what's right, you might not always win, but you'll never truly lose, because your dignity remains intact.'" She paused, looking around at the transformed branch. "In this case, we did win, not just by removing one discriminatory manager, but by creating a new model for what banking can be. The victory isn't revenge. It's creating a system where what happened to me can't happen to someone else." Zora nodded thoughtfully. "I want to learn more. Would you be willing to mentor me, like Eleanor did for you?" The request touched Jasmine deeply. "I'd be honored," she said, remembering how Eleanor had taken a chance on her decades earlier. That's how change becomes permanent, when each generation lifts up the next. As the celebration finally concluded, Jasmine stood at the entrance of the Franklin branch, watching people depart. 6 months earlier, she had walked out of these same doors humiliated and angry after being denied service. Now she stood as the architect of transformation, having turned a personal affront into institutional change. Teresa Chen joined her at the door. "The Franklin branch is officially the gold standard now," she said. "Every metric we track is exemplary. Other banks are calling me asking how we did it." "We told the truth," Jasmine replied simply. "We confronted discrimination directly, instead of pretending it didn't exist, and then we built something better." Teresa nodded. "We've had requests from 32 other financial institutions to share our training programs and policies. This could create industry-wide change." "That's the real victory," Jasmine said, watching as Zora Thompson chatted animatedly with Kenneth Wilson about internship opportunities. Not just changing one branch or one bank, but changing what people believe is possible. As the sun set over the Franklin branch, Jasmine reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. What had begun as a humiliating experience of discrimination had catalyzed a transformation that nobody could have predicted, least of all Walter Sloan, who had so gravely underestimated the woman he had refused to serve. Sometimes justice arrived in unexpected ways, not through revenge, but through rebuilding, not through punishment alone, but through creating a better system that rendered the old biases obsolete. "Ready to head back to the office?" Kevin asked, appearing at her side. "Not yet," Jasmine replied, watching as the last few community members lingered, reluctant to leave the space that had once been so unwelcoming but now felt like it truly belonged to them. "I want to enjoy this moment a little longer." The Franklin branch stood as a testament to what was possible when discrimination was confronted rather than ignored. It wasn't just a bank anymore. It was a blueprint for change. Jasmine's journey teaches us that true change requires more than individual success. It demands systemic transformation. When faced with discrimination, she could have simply filed a complaint or sought personal vindication. Instead, she recognized that the problem was cultural and institutional, requiring comprehensive reform. The story reminds us that accountability matters. Walter's discriminatory practices persisted because previous complaints were settled quietly without addressing root causes. By refusing to accept token gestures, Jasmine created lasting change that benefited countless others. We also learn the power of strategic response over emotional reaction. Following Eleanor's guidance, Jasmine channeled her justified anger into methodical action, gathering evidence and building coalitions to support her cause. Perhaps most importantly, the story demonstrates how diversity strengthens institutions. The transformed Franklin branch didn't just become more equitable, it became more successful, proving that inclusion creates better outcomes for everyone. Finally, Jasmine shows us the importance of mentorship and legacy. Just as Eleanor guided her, she now guides Zora, ensuring progress continues across generations. True victory isn't measured by personal advancement alone, but by creating pathways for others to follow. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could make a difference? Or perhaps you've experienced it yourself and wondered what real justice might look like beyond simple revenge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If Jasmine's strategic approach to fighting systemic racism inspired you, hit that like button to help more people discover this powerful story. Subscribe to our channel for more narratives about individuals who transform injustice into positive change. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that one person truly can make a difference. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage, accountability, and transformation. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't just overcoming it personally. It's changing the system so others don't have to face the same barriers. Together, we can build a more equitable world, one story at a time.